How's it going, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of Infinite Sports. I know it's been a little bit, but as always, I'm your host, Kenneth Grunfelder. Talk some Yankees. Spring training underway. Wanted to give you some thoughts. A few games have been played. Just some takeaways from how they've gone. Obviously, don't want to go too crazy. Don't want to get too caught up in things that happen because these games obviously don't matter. Guys are just trying to get themselves ramped up for the season. Also, we got the WBC coming up soon. So, guys like Aaron Judge, you're going to see him out there more. But based off of what Judge did over the weekend, he's already in midseason form, hitting a couple of home runs. So, that is one thing I do take into account that, hey, Judge is going to have a big year, obviously, if he stays healthy. They've definitely, touched on the elbow, asked him, how the elbow feels, and, you know, there's no concern there. At least that's how he's coming off when he's asked about the elbow. So that's at least encouraging. Although I still have my concerns. I don't want to get into the middle of the season and all of a sudden it comes up again. And if Aaron Judge goes down, well, Yankees are they're done. They're done. But we've seen some of the young guys like Legrande and Elmer Rodriguez. We've seen them take the mound and what they got, and they could play important roles for this team later in the season. They're probably going to start the year in the minors. When you look at the Yankees team right now, the rotation's not going to be at full strength to start the season. Garrett Cole and Carlos Rodon are going to come back, whether it's late May, early June, for both of those guys. I think how the Yankees rotation is set up going into the season to at least start the year, I think they're still in a good spot. I mean, you got to remember, last year they went into the season with Marcus Stroman and Carlos Carrasco occupying two of the spots in the rotation. Now, you're going to go into a full year of Cam Schlittler. The back inflammation, I know that's been a little bit of a concern, but he obviously dismissed it, and he's going to be ready to go when the season starts. You got Max Fried. Will Warren pitched today and pitched well. I think he had four. Did he have four strikeouts? The Yankees played the Blue Jays today. They won 8-7, and Will Warren started the game. But he's going to play a role. Played a huge role last year. Really, helped the Yankees out. After a rough start to his career in 2024. But yeah, he had four strikeouts today. Gave up 4 hits, 2 2/3 innings pitched. We saw Hedrick pitch. We saw Jake Bird pitched. They both pitched scoreless innings. They each had a couple of strikeouts. But yeah, Jake Bird and Brent Hendrick, they're going to be playing roles in the bullpen. But yeah, the rotation, like I said, Will Warren, Max Fried, Cam Schlittler, Luis Gil, who we also saw pitch over the weekend, only made one mistake. It was the home run to Jared Young, but, it was touching, I think, around 96, 97 miles per hour, which is encouraging. Same thing with Garrett Cole. As he's trying to ramp up as well. We could see him in some spring games before we get to the start of the regular season. But yeah, you'll have Luis Gil, and then also Ryan Weathers could be in the rotation as well. And then you also have some backup options like Ryan Yarborough and Paul Blackburn that are going to start out in the bullpen, or they're going to be in the bullpen when we get to the regular season. So the Yankees do have depth with their rotation, whereas last year, bringing in Yarborough was a good move, even though he did get hurt. The Yankees still were able to piece it together, and then Cam Schlittler came up, and the rotation kind of stabilized. So, if it does take Rodon and Cole longer to come back, Yankees have options. And so far, I mean, the Yankees didn't really do much in their first spring game, but they put up 20 runs over the weekend. Like I said, Judge hit a couple of home runs. Spencer Jones hit a home run 408 feet. And, his new stance was a topic of conversation, how he's kind of got an Ohtani-like stance. So we'll see, what kind of impact Spencer Jones has this season, if at all, unless he's, part of some kind of trade package, because I know Spencer Jones and Jasson Domínguez, what the logjam that the Yankees have in the outfield, and Domínguez likely starting the year in AAA. they could be traded. I hope they don't end up being traded. I've kind of gone back and forth. Well, with Spencer Jones, I've kind of gone back and forth with him being traded or not. But Domínguez, I with him, being younger than Jones and the ability that he has, and the hype around him, and Spencer Jones has hype too. It's just I want to see Domínguez get a shot. I do want to see Spencer Jones get a shot, but if there is a trade out there that the Yankees can make where they're getting a very impactful player, then yeah, I wouldn't be opposed to trading them. I would say trade them. But I do want to see these guys have a chance if there isn't a trade out there that the Yankees can get somebody really impactful to kind of help this team get them over the top. But yeah, no, Jones, the home run, the power is there. I mean, it's just the problem is the guy strikes out a lot. He did have a couple of strikeouts after that, but hey, if he's a guy that can show off that power and maybe cut down on the strikeouts, because that was the problem Judge had earlier in his career, then the Yankees potentially have another superstar in the making. And he had a pretty good year in the minors last year. It's just, again, the strikeouts were an issue. And the strikeouts are an issue with this Yankees team. I mean, that's what we saw last year, and that plagued them in the playoffs. A lot of strikeouts. The Yankees got to cut down on that, which I don't know if they're necessarily going to, because, again, you're kind of running back the same team. But, it's something that hopefully, some guys' approaches can change this upcoming season. We'll see. But I don't believe we talked about the Paul Goldschmidt re-signing. They did bring back Goldschmidt. Goldschmidt had a couple of hits today, hit a home run, had a 2-run double, a 2-run homer. So, listen, I like bringing back Goldschmidt. He's not going to be an everyday player. Ben Rice is going to be the first baseman, which is the right move. And Goldschmidt's kind of going to be a mentor, which I like that. I think, Ben Rice can obviously learn a lot from Goldschmidt. And I think Goldschmidt can still provide, a decent bat off the bench. And, if he's got to start a couple times a week, I think he could still do that. I mean, the beginning of the year, Goldschmidt was a hitting machine, right? And then it kind of just slowed down. But I think, now it's come to the realization that, hey, he's not an everyday player anymore. Now he's 38 years old. And like I said, I think he'd come off the bench and be a valuable piece. We saw him come in some pinch hit situations last year and have some clutch home runs. So Goldschmidt can do that, and he can come in and be a defensive replacement too, as well. If he's got to come in and face a lefty, you could do that. So I do think there's some value with bringing back Goldschmidt, and Goldschmidt wants to win a championship, and the Yankees are one of those teams that has championship aspirations. I know it hasn't happened in a long time, but for the most part, every single year they are one of those teams that has the best odds to win a championship. And I think this Yankees team, when it gets right, when it gets healthy, they are going to be a very good team. Now, they're going to play in a tough division. Red Sox rotation is going to be very good this year. They brought in Ranger Suarez, to go along with Garrett Crochet. They also brought in Sonny Gray as well. The lineup should be pretty good. Roman Anthony, a full year, dealt with injuries last year. Well, dealt with injuries last year. You expect him maybe to have a monster year. The Orioles lineup could be a problem. Pitching could still be a concern with them. The Blue Jays, I know the Yankees won today. It doesn't matter, but it's a spring training game. But, the Blue Jays are going to be an issue. So it's going to be a tough division. But I think when the Yankees get to full strength, their rotation on paper could be one of the best in baseball. The lineup, look, they were at the top of a lot of stats last year, and now they're running it back. And the bullpen, that is definitely a question mark. That is definitely a question mark coming in. I trust David Bednar back there, but, some of the other options, some guys are going to have to step up. And we'll see. And maybe, the Yankees are going to have to make some moves at the deadline like they did last year. Now, they got 3 relievers last year. They're hoping for better things out of Jake Bird. Maybe Doval found something as he kind of moved along in his Yankee tenure last year. Bednar, again, stepped into the closer role. They did bring back Tim Hill. Tim Hill's very reliable. You're going to have, some guys coming at, some long relievers, like I said, with Blackburn and Yarbrough being backup options for the rotation, but they'll be in the bullpen. Hedrick can be an option, like I said. So, we'll see. I mean, the bullpen was an issue last year. usually is a strength for the team. Wasn't necessarily that last year. Oh, actually, I forgot to mention Fernando Cruz, too. Fernando Cruz was reliable as well. So, we'll see how the bullpen shapes out. But if they have to address the bullpen at the trade deadline, they will do that. And usually every team, if you're competing for a playoff spot, most teams need to upgrade the bullpen. So there's going to be bullpen options if they have to go out and do that. But I do like where the Yankees team is at. I also, talking about Spencer Jones and Domínguez again, I know I brought up the trade rumors and how that could happen at some point. Again, if there's an impactful player that you can go out and get to bring in that could put you over the top, I'm for that. But if there's not a trade out there, keep them. Because here's the thing. Trent Grisham is on a qualifying offer, okay? He is not going to be here after this year. It's not happening. And then Giancarlo Stanton, this is his second to last year with the team. He's got 2 years left on his contract, and then he's going to be off the team. So then that's going to open up opportunities for Domínguez and Spencer Jones to be, key components of this team. Obviously, they have to, be impactful with their opportunities. But right now they just don't have the opportunities because of the logjam that they have with the outfield. Judge playing right, and obviously they brought back Bellinger, which you had to do that. Yankees, look, they I guess they kind of figured that Grisham wasn't going to come back. And then he wasn't going to accept a qualifying offer, and the Yankees were going to get a draft pick out of it. But that didn't happen. Grisham came back. And I don't like all the negativity around Grisham. Like, I get it. I'm not expecting him to replicate what he did last year. But the guy did have a good year. And he did have some very clutch hits for this team last year as well in big spots. So let's have a little more appreciation for what he did. I get it. I didn't really blame the Yankees for offering or giving Grisham the qualifying offer because, at the time I did kind of assume like, oh, everybody usually declines it and he'll opt to go to free agency. But he didn't do that. So then that put the Yankees in a tough spot, and then they went and they got Bellinger back, which that took a while, but they got it done, and here we are. But yeah, they're just kind of, hamstrung right now because, Stanton takes up the DH spot, and if you didn't have Stanton and if you didn't have Grisham on this team, it gives you more flexibility. But it's just they don't have that right now. And Stanton, speaking of Stanton, right now, it's all good. It's healthy. That's what you want to hear going into the season. But at some point he is going to get hurt. So an opportunity will open up for one of these guys. And I don't like to say that, but it just, that's what happens. Stanton gets hurt. He goes on the IL at least once every year. And sometimes it could be a short stint. Most of the time it's a long stint. So Domínguez and Spencer Jones got to stay ready, when their name is called. Now, the thing is, for Spencer Jones, the power's there, but he's also a very good fielder. Domínguez, that's where he has struggled. Now, Domínguez, from the left side of the plate, was pretty good last year. I just wish that, he was a complete switch hitter because he's not very good from the right side. If that was the case, that adds a lot of value to this team, having a switch hitter, which is something the Yankees, I feel like miss in this lineup. They really haven't had that in quite some time. So, we will see how that all plays out. But yeah, again, if there's a trade to be made that you're getting someone very good to come to this team, then you trade one of these guys. But I think based off of where the Yankees could be, after this year, with Grisham leaving and then you got 1 year left with Stanton, I think you hold on to these two guys. I do believe that. And then also, I know Judge, kind of talked about the Yankees offseason and how it was kind of frustrating with the lack of moves early on, and a lot of guys are flying off the board. I do agree, kind of got taken out of context because, in the beginning you're kind of like, what are the Yankees doing? And then, you're hearing all these different things with Bellinger and how they're far apart, and you're like, it looks like Bellinger's not coming back. He might go somewhere else. But then they finally got Bellinger back, and Judge did say, like, he's happy with how the offseason went. Like, you got back Bellinger, you brought back Grisham, Judge wanted that. You're running back the same team that, I know the Blue Jays finished in first place, but you had the same amount of wins last year in the American League. And if it wasn't for some bullpen meltdowns, Yankees could have had the best record. The Yankees could have had more wins. But that didn't happen. So, look, I know a lot of people are frustrated that they should have did more, maybe did something different. I would have liked to have seen them bring in Bichette. I really do. But that didn't happen. They're going with Caballero. Caballero homered, I think it was yesterday. I like Caballero starting at short to start the year. Not going to be the long-term answer, but you also have George Lombard Jr. that could potentially, come up at some point maybe if he looks like he's ready. Now, Volpe, look, it hasn't worked out. His back is kind of against the wall. But maybe this motivates him. Maybe he comes back and he proves in year 3 or year 3. No, year 4. Wow, year 4 already. That's unbelievable. In year 4 that he is the shortstop going forward, but I just don't think that's the case. And then also, looking at second base, Jazz Chisholm. Jazz Chisholm making some bold claims, saying he could become the second player to go 50-50. Listen, I hope Jazz Chisholm can do that. I think Jazz Chisholm is in for a big year. But you do worry a little bit. I do agree with this, that you don't want to set these expectations and then, just only focus on that. Like, I think Girardi said this on the broadcast the other day. Like, 50 stolen bases, yes, that is very doable. Very doable. And especially with the rule changes, look at the seasons that, right, Acuna and Ellie De La Cruz with their stolen bases, right? Stolen base, it's easier to get a stolen base. But 50 home runs, it's tough. Not a lot of people can do that. And Jazz last year, talked about going 70% and not, overdoing it. And that kind of like helped him after he came back from injury. I think he's got to still stick with that kind of philosophy. Because going for just the home runs, that's gonna throw you off. Listen, the home runs will come. But the Yankees need Jazz Chisholm to be a big player in this offense, in this lineup. He can't become this all or nothing player. Now, I'm not saying Jazz hits for a high average. He really hasn't done that. But Jazz Chisholm provides a lot for this team. And like I said, I think Jazz Chisholm will have a big year. But I just think he needs to stick with his same philosophy from last year. And he will have a big year. And if he didn't, hurt his oblique, he would have had even a better year than he did last year. So if he could stay healthy the whole year, he's going to put up some big numbers. But don't let the home runs overtake your approach at the plate. Go up there and just, as simple as it sounds, just try to get on base. Just try to get on base. That's all we're asking. Like I said, the home runs will come. But, some bold claims there by Jazz. Look, I feel good about this Yankees team. And like I said, I do think if there's any weaknesses, I think they'll address them at the deadline. I don't think this Yankees team has a ton of holes. I think again, we're going into this year where I'm also expecting some young guys, once again, to play key roles. And I'm looking at Austin Wells. I'm looking at Ben Rice. Ben Rice, you look at his baseball savant page, it jumps off the page, literally. All the red you see. You expect Ben Rice to have a big year. Now being the first baseman. And Austin Wells expected a lot from him last year, and he was a disappointment. That's got to change this year. I mean, look, he did hit over 20 home runs. He had 21 home runs last year, but batting average is not where it was supposed to be, the OPS. Got to see more out of him. And then, we'll see if, again, Domínguez and Spencer Jones play roles. But, Judge is going to have a big year if he's healthy. Bellinger, I expect him to have another solid year for them. Jazz, like I said, a big year. Stanton, if he's healthy. Last year he was very good, throughout the summer after he came back. It's just when we got to October, he really slowed down. Maybe got hot a little too early. I like where this team is at. I think this team's going to be good. This team's going to be a playoff team. Team's going to be dangerous. You know, they have a chance to win the AL. They do, but they got to go out there and prove it. And it's just there's definitely some optimism. There's reasons to be optimistic with this team that they're going to go out there and have a really good year. Now, things can fall apart. They can have that June swoon like they always have. And then, we're acting like the sky is falling. But I think this team will be. I don't think they're going to have the same kind of June swoon that they've had in years past. I don't think so. But again, they got to go out there and prove it. And again, I think you will see young guys come up and have to step up, whether it's in the lineup, whether it's in the rotation or in the bullpen. There's going to be some reinforcements that maybe the Yankees didn't necessarily have, at certain points last year. But we'll see. So again, you don't want to get too caught up in certain things with spring training. Guys are just kind of, getting their timing right and, their routine down. And then once we get to the season, then things really do matter. But, it's good that baseball's back and, looking forward to the season. Also, I guess the last thing before we wrap up here. So, ABS. We've kind of seen it. It's going to be in the regular season. The strategy that kind of goes into it. The Yankees have definitely been aggressive with it. And, I guess they're just kind of getting a feel for it. But there definitely is going to have to be some strategy that comes along with it. Because, you only get 2 challenges and you lose both of them early on in the game. You're not going to have it in pivotal moments. So I do think there's going to be I do think there'll be some adjustments. But obviously Judge is going to be a beneficiary for this because he's gotten called out on so many low strikes. I mean, one of them, he ended up getting thrown out of a game for it, but that was ridiculous that the umpire would even throw out Aaron Judge. I like it. It's all about being accurate, and there are times where the strike zone can be very frustrating. But again, you got to be very strategic with it. And again, Girardi was talking about it on the broadcast. There's certain players you give them the A-OK to challenge if you feel like the call was not correct. And then there's some guys where you'd probably be a little hesitant, hey, I don't think you should be the one to challenge because, you end up being incorrect or, you misjudge a call or your emotions get in the way. That's again, something that, Aaron Boone's going to have to figure out with his players. And, they'll figure it out when we get to the season. But I do like that this system has been instituted. I think it's all about accuracy and getting things right. And again, umpires, it's tough for them. But again, some strike calls are just, when you're calling a strike on Aaron Judge that's below his knees, I mean, it's just can't happen. Can't happen. So, Judge is going to be a beneficiary of that. And I would say even Juan Soto as well, because Juan Soto knows the strike zone very well too. So, baseball is back. And like I said, the Yankees got an 8-7 win over the Blue Jays today. So, hey, want to know to start off 2026 against the Blue Jays? That's good, right? Not yet. Once we get to the regular season. But, we're moving along here. Basketball season, we're a couple of months away from the NBA playoffs, and we got March Madness coming up. And then, also got NFL free agency coming up in the coming weeks and the draft in a couple months. So there'll be stuff to discuss as we move along here. But just wanted to give you guys some thoughts on the Yankees spring training. And, we did touch upon the ABS system a little bit as well. So as always, everybody, make sure to leave a like, comment, and subscribe to the video, to the channel. Make sure to follow us on the social media platforms in the description below. And wherever you get your podcasts, you can follow us as well. Just look up Infinite Sports and you'll find us there. And as always, everybody, I'm your host, Kenneth Grunfelder, signing off. Have a good one, and I'll talk to you guys next time. Take care.